Okay, guys, this is going to be fun again. So, Ike, here's your big question in one sentence. What's the hardest part about being a child star?
Going to school.
From the heart of Hollywood, it's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show with Patrick Labyorteaux.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show. Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Tonight's episode, Ike Eisenmann.
Patrick Labyorteaux Show. He's the one you gotta know.
All right, you know him as Tony from any movie with the words Witch Mountain in it. He's guest starred on like everything from Mannix to Little House on the Prairie. He got burned to a crisp by radiation in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and looped the voices of too many stars to mention. Please welcome the returning champion, my buddy, Ike Eisenmann.
Hey man. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Well,
and you
okay,
look great as usual. You're just aging entirely too well, and it's totally not fair.
Well, my wife always laughs because she goes, "Man, you've got your lights and your filters and your angles so keyed in." And I go, "Damn right I do. I have to." You know, if you're your own cinematographer, you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a quick recap here. Ike has been on before. We went over his career, but we've known each other since we were kids. I became friends with his brother, Al, and we became like best friends because Ike was older and he was like, he was unapproachable. But now we realize it's like he was only like a year and a half older. And so now we're friends. But he was on the show before. We talked about your career. We talked about very specific things. But you've gone and written a book, which is a really, really good book. And at the time we did our last show, we had talked a little bit about that, but it wasn't released yet. It's released now. So we're going to do this multiple times throughout the show. I'll put up a picture here. Please tell me the name of the book, where you can get it, what the deal is so that we can get into it.
Well, it's titled "You'll Never Be a Star: My Fantastic, Challenging Journey to Disney, Star Trek, and Beyond," and it's available on Amazon.com. Obviously, it's also at BarnesandNoble.com. It's not in any stores, so you have to buy it online. But it's available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle or a digital version if that's your preference. It's so funny. I'm an old school guy where I love books. I like to hold a book in my hand, but nothing beats the convenience of sitting in front of my computer with a glass of wine and reading a book off the screen that I can just flick through.
Act 1, Beginnings.
Okay, so let's go just a quick wrap up. So you started acting as a young kid.
Yeah.
Your dad was a TV personality in Texas. Mm-hmm. He was Cadet Kelly?
Cadet Don.
Yeah. Cadet Don. Cadet Kelly, I think, was a Disney Channel movie. Cadet Don. And so your dad was on TV. You'd see him on the TV. And then you ended up doing TV and stuff. But let's talk about this book, because the book goes through your whole experience. And forgive me, because I knew I was interviewing you. I know you've done other friends' shows. I know you were with Moosey and on your previous show. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm asking some of the same questions, I just didn't want to be influenced by how everything was. So I'm just coming to you as like a reader of the book.
Sure.
The thing that I really took away from the book was when you start describing, what's her name, Virginia, the casting director over at Disney?
Oh, Virginia Higgins, yeah.
Virginia Higgins. When you start describing Virginia Higgins and walking into that office over at Disney, which is right across from the gate, the little casting office there, your details are so good that like another kid like myself who was there, it's like it just pulled me right back to that time. And your descriptions of different things on sets and everything was so wonderfully specific. I just want to let everybody know, when you read the book, this is kind of like one of the best experiences of like how a set really worked, at least back in the 70s. It's a lot different now. So what was it that made you first want to say, okay, I'm going to take this on and write this book?
Well, it was a lengthy, excruciating process because I never, not that anyone ever really said that I should write a book, but I never wanted to write a book. I had, like memoirs, in my arrogant opinion, were, kind of self-indulgent. And it's like, here, read about me, and I'm going to tell you about me, which has always been a sore spot for me. Because, and I know we will get into this at a certain point, because of my relationship with my father. It's like it smacks of narcissism to me, and that's a real big, I hate to use the word because it's so, modern now, but a trigger for me. It just makes me uncomfortable. But there was an experience with Kim Richards, who was my co-star in the Witch Mountain films. After we had done, and I do detail this in the book, there was a particular experience when we were doing a live press junket for a re-release of both Escape to Witch Mountain and Return from Witch Mountain after the premiere of Race to Witch Mountain. So we were both there for the event together. We were both booked for this. It was an ABC affiliates press junket. So we were in a little dark room with a camera on us, earpieces in our head, and we went from East Coast to West Coast every 10 minutes, hitting a different affiliate and being on the air and being interviewed.
Yeah, they have
right?
the camera on you, and then it's satellite fed to the rest of the country.
Exactly.
So you can talk to. It's like a Zoom call with the rest of the country,
but no screen, so you can't see anyone. You just hear the people. That's the thing. It's like you got the red light and the camera staring at you, and you're like, oh my god, what? I don't even know who these people are. So they were asking, a lot of questions, right? They were short. It was a short interview, few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, but they kept asking questions, and I was trying to defer to Kim as much as I possibly could to let her be involved in it, but she didn't have any stories, and I have, obviously, because I wrote the book, about 1,000 stories, and stories I didn't even have room to include. And so I'm rattling. We go through this 3-hour process. We were both so exhausted by the end of it. But she only could recollect one story from her experience that I knew with a very high level of certainty did not happen. And it made me feel bad. And I thought, God, this is terrible. This is the one thing she remembers, and I know it didn't happen. But when we wrap the whole thing up, we're hugging each other goodbye. She pulls me in really tight to her, and she whispers in my ear, how do you remember all that stuff? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I don't remember anything. And it broke my freaking heart, because this movie and that experience for me is probably the crown jewel in all of the things that I've ever done for me in terms of joy, fun, the payoff. It's I'm part of a Disney classic Disney movie forever. Right. 2 actually, if you want to count both of them.
And let's be honest, you have a problem. You have an issue with Disney, as you can tell from behind you.
I know. You should see this other wall over here.
I believe it's called addiction.
Yeah, but I just said I was gobsmacked by that. And we said our goodbyes, and I turned to Tia and I said, she doesn't remember anything. And she said, Tia, who is my wife's real name, actually. People laugh at that because that's, my sister's name in the movies, in Witch Mountain films. But I said she doesn't remember anything. And she said maybe that's why she had such a hard time telling any stories. And I literally, on the plane flight home, I sat and I thought, fate has now met me, at the starting point for this. I have to write this down, because I knew I was maybe one of 2 people alive that remembered anything from making the movie, and I thought, I need to start putting this down. But it was still that self-indulgent thing that made it difficult for me to do it in its final form. That took me 6 years to get to. I ended up writing.
So you got in by way of, it came to you as a service, an idea of service to get these memories down, as opposed to, hey, everybody, look at me, I was in this great movie.
Yeah, it was just like, here's how the movie was made, here are the stories, here are my experiences. And I did the very first version of it as like an interview with with a dear friend of mine, ours, who is a massive Escape to Witch Mountain fan, and he and I used to talk about it a lot. He asked me all these questions, and I thought, and he was eating up, the stories I was telling. So I thought, God, maybe this is a way I can cheat my way into this. We can do an interview where he can ask me questions, just like we're doing now, and I can answer them, and then we can put it in, a book format, and people can read it, and then it'll just be about Witch Mountain. But I had more than one person who read what we had put together say, the story really is about you. It's not about that. And there's not my wife said, Ike, you're not really in here anywhere. You're just talking. And I thought, oh God, I'm really going to have to do this. And so I then abandoned that, and I said, I can't go forward with that because that'll dilute anything else I want to write should I decide to make it through this process. And I wrote another draft that was from my perspective, but it still lacked any of my personality. There were no stories about my father, and that's where the title comes from, You'll Never Be a Star, because it was something he used in a very cruel way to try to keep me in my place as a child actor. But again, we could talk about that later. Well,
let's talk about this part now, which is you're very brutally honest about your father, your relationship with your father, and his effect on you.
Yeah.
There's a moment, because not everybody has thought about I've thought about writing. And there are things in my life where it's like, you can be honest, or you can be, is that too much information? Is that the information that I want to share with the world? And you share this information that's really important to your story, but is also very, very personal. What was the thing that allowed you to make that call and go, okay, I'm gonna tell everything?
Well, when I finally came to the conclusion, what got me to this version of my book was what I finally figured out what my take was going to be, how I was going to approach it. Because I read, Alison Arngrim's memoir is, I consider, and I think the praise is highly deserved, the gold standard of ex-child star memoirs, because she wrote such an incredibly good book, and she dealt with some deeply personal, troubling issues in there in a way that was so masterful. I thought, holy cow, if she can do this, well, maybe I can too.
Yeah.
But I decided to tell the story from the perspective of a child. I wanted the reader to experience what it's like to be in the room, in the shoes of a child in the moment, the pressures, the joys, the fun. And then all of a sudden I get to my father and I think, oh God, I can't avoid this. I've got to do this too. And as I continued to write through it, I realized that, my entire life was shaped as much by all of the great things I got to do, as well as this very, very difficult, troubling relationship that I had with this man that taught me how not to be a man, or how to be the man I wanted to be, how to be the successful person that I wanted to be. And you can't refer to it, you got to take people through the experience. And so that it was difficult, and yes, it's very personal and sometimes seemingly embarrassing. Whenever you have a difficult thing you go through at someone else's hands, you take on a certain amount of guilt for that, and you feel like, I always felt like it was my fault that I didn't get along with my father, and that was something that had to get past.
Because as a reader, or as the other side of it, whenever I read something like Alison's book or like your book, what I'm immediately faced with is, obviously we're on your side. Obviously, because we're going through your viewpoint of it, we don't feel the embarrassment that a real person does, because we're not you.
Right.
And so that part of it's interesting. I also find it really fascinating, the two ideas of Kim couldn't remember anything, yet you're telling a story that is usually the type of story that people lock away and like, oh, I don't remember my father well. I don't remember the incident. And, one could make the argument, and I'm making this argument as pure conjecture and not about Kim, that she doesn't remember a lot because of something else. I don't know what it is, but it's like there's something going on there that if you don't remember anything,
Yeah.
There's something happening. Yet you remember so many specific details about your dad. Had you gone into therapy or anything prior to this to like?
Oh yeah, back when I was struggling with it the most was after I became an adult. I was an actor. I was building a new career in ADR, which you know about, voiceover work, post-production voice work. And my father started out being a controlling person in the very, very beginning when I was a very young actor, and then he just continued to build some sort of bizarre obsession with me. He wanted to be my best friend. He wanted to be around me all the time. He kept injecting himself into my life, but he was always so cruel and verbally abusive towards me that I reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. So I got into therapy. I saw 2 different therapists, a psychologist, as well as an MFCC over the course of like 18 months. And I thought, I'm not getting anywhere. No one's helping me. They are of no help to me. I do not know what to do. And it was devastating because I thought, I'm simply trapped. But I had carried through that the idea that it was my fault and I had to fix it and I had to figure out how to fix it. So I asked another friend of mine who was not one of my therapists, but he is also he happened to be a therapist. I said, look, I need to talk to you about this because I literally don't know what to do and I'm losing my mind. So he said, I will see you as a friend. We can have a chat as friends. And I said, that would be fantastic. So I unload all this stuff on him, and I'm telling him my entire history. I mean, blubbering, crying from for the early days of my childhood all the way through everything, my father's behaviors that were terrifying and very revealing and up to a certain point. And I said, I have to figure out, how do I fix this? How do I fix this with him? Because I can't live like this anymore. And he very calmly, after I was done, he very calmly said to me, why do you feel you have to be in a relationship with him? And I thought, what the hell? What are you talking about? I literally said, what do you mean? He's my father. I have no choice. He said, we always have a choice, Ike. It might not be an easy one, but you always have a choice. If you had a friend who treated you this way, would you still be friends with them? And I said, well, no, of course not. Well, then why do you need to be in a relationship with him? And then he helped, and it was the most mind-boggling thing I've ever heard. And I have spent some time in Al-Anon 12-step program because I thought, maybe my father was an alcoholic, and I thought maybe that's the source of the problem, and I could figure out how to get through this, through that. And I heard a lot of stories about a lot of people who it just never occurs to them that they don't have to be the doormat. They don't have to be in the abusive relationship. They can choose to leave it. And it had never occurred to me. It was like bizarre. So once I kind of accepted that thought, I thought, okay, then how do I do it? And he talked me through the steps I needed to take, but it meant completely just cutting myself off from him completely. No contact of any kind. Treat him like a stalker. It's basically it was the foundation of how therapists and the police department teach victims of stalking to deal with it. You can't have any engagement with them because they'll see yelling and screaming as a positive thing for them, and so they will continue to engage.
It's an input,
yeah. So that was what I had to do, and he spent a lot of years trying to reinsert himself into my life, and I just kept the walls up and said, nope. And it was hugely beneficial for me. But that was part of what I needed to write about. I needed to write about what led up to that process of going through that, and then how I dealt with it, and how I have, how I've thrived as a result. So
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. So since we've teased this a lot, and I don't want to be that type of podcast or conversation, I want you to give me and give the audience a sense of your dad and what it is. And I can ask 1,000 questions and lead you to certain things, but I think obviously you've done it for the book. You know it better. And I think it's just, I will say this, your dad, Al Sr., he was a scary guy, but he was a scary guy in the way that, like, he'd smile and be nice to you, and you were still scared, but you didn't know why as a little kid. It was just sort of like something is coming, like that feeling of there's always going to be, when the other shoe drops, and you didn't know what or where. And I was just a friend that would come in, and that was what I was feeling. So that's my input. That's my mini chapter in Ike's book.
Yeah.
Explain this guy and why you think he was like that.
Well, I'll jump to the end.
Okay.
What I ended up learning way after writing the book that I had never considered either, because no one had ever brought this up with my father. But my father suffered from narcissistic personality disorder. We throw around the term narcissist so easily these days. Oh, she's such a narcissist. He's such a narcissist. But right. It really is a clinical diagnosis in the psychological text. So it is a thing. And I learned about it because yet again, my wife came in and saved my behind. She found an article on AOL and sent it to me that was like, are you the child of a narcissistic parent? And it asked all these questions about behaviors and feelings and stuff. I answered yes to every single one of them. And I thought, my God, I was never able to put a label on it. But going back to the very beginning, my father did exhibit all of these behaviors as far as I can remember as a child. He was completely self-involved. He was completely he had this impression that he was going to be the next biggest star in Hollywood, which is why we moved from Texas, and he left his really fantastic, show that he had. He was a huge star in Houston, Texas, with his children's show. It was on live television every day, 6 days a week, not 6 days a week. And he was recognized everywhere he went. And he just thought, I'm going to take this to California, and it's just going to pick up from there, and I'm going to be the next Frank Sinatra. And it did not happen, and it did not happen in such a huge way that it was kind of embarrassing to witness as a child. But he would...
So you were aware of the expectations and the failure to meet those expectations.
Absolutely.
Being around. Okay.
He used to sit me down on a regular basis, and this was just the weirdest thing that I thought, man, does any other kid ever go through this with a parent? He'd sit at the foot of my bed, make me stand there, and he would go into these rants about how no one appreciates him, and he's this, and he's such a genius, and no one in Houston really recognized it, and they should be seeing it here and now, and I should be on that series. And he would basically tell me. I mean, it wasn't like I just had to observe it, from afar. He was sitting there spilling it out to me, and I thought, why is he telling me all this stuff? What am I supposed to do about it? Yeah. It just didn't make any sense. And this was before he even got me into the business. Then one day he asked me if I wanted to do commercials when I was 9 years old. And it was something that I had wanted to do so much, but I never said anything about it because it was my father's thing, right? And that thing you're talking about, and I appreciate you sharing that with me, what your impression of him was back then, because there are very few people I know who knew him, back then, who can give me any kind of input about what he was like to be around, because he had a forceful, powerful personality. He was not completely devoid of what would be necessary to become a star, other than talent. That was a big thing. He didn't have enough. Well,
like all narcissists, and I know a little bit because I think my mom was the same in a different way, but in the same idea, they have charisma. Yeah, that's what makes them dangerous.
Exactly, because they're fun to be around, and no one sees the darker side of all of that unless you're alone with them or you're intimately involved with them. And so my father was a very angry man. He got pissed off very easily, and it didn't take much to set him off, just like you described. And quite often my brother and I or my mother would, and we would have to bear the brunt of his verbal abuse, sometimes physical abuse. But he didn't demonstrate that stuff to the outer world. So he was still able to forge some kind of a career, in commercials, and he had 5 and unders, which means you got 5 lines or less in a TV show or a movie. But he got me into the business, and I thought I couldn't figure out why, because I started booking commercials really fast, and I started booking a lot of them, and he became my stage father. So he had to take me around everywhere. But what I saw him doing as he took me around to auditions, to the jobs, he would insert himself into the process. And he would try to meet the producers and the directors and the casting directors. He made sure he had a handshake moment with whoever was casting, the commercial at our audition, so his face got out there. And I have often said my father would have thrived today in the world of social media, because he was doing all of that stuff just without the without the technology.
Yeah, yeah.
But the key, one of the key points of him, I finally realized one day when he said this for the first time, and this is just an example of his narcissism. He saw me as an extension of himself. My success was his success, and he wanted to present that whenever he could. And Gunsmoke was the first TV show I got at 10 years old. And I was so excited because literally, and this never really happened that much back in the day, but I walked out of the audition with the part. I mean, the director basically said to to the casting director, we'll see you in a few weeks or a couple weeks. So I knew I had the part, and she came out, introduced herself to my father, and said, we'll be working with Ike very soon. He's a marvelous young actor. You must be very proud of him. And he said, well, he's never taken a class, and I'd never taken an acting class. And she said, oh, really? That's amazing. And he said, yes, I taught him everything he knows. And my father never taught me a single thing, because he used to be the example. Right. He was the example of what I didn't want to do if I wanted to become successful as an actor, because then I could see his work. I could see the work I wanted to do. I saw the work on television. But that was one of the first big sledgehammers that I got hit with by him, that he's taking credit for what I'm doing. And so that's an involvement of just the personality disorder issues. They became more violent as time went on, and it became scarier in many different ways. But the thing you end up learning, and I came to terms with, is you can't confront a narcissist, because they're never going to hear you. They're never going to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Oh man, I'll think twice about that next time." Or no,
why
it's okay.
Why are you attacking me?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this to me?
What's wrong with you? So you're in a no-win situation, and I have met so many people who had narcissistic parents. It's incredible. But they either have learned it on at a certain point and how to deal with it, and some of them don't know how to deal with it. They're still just sitting in it, and they're difficult, and they're powerful, and they will get under your skin, they get into your psyche, and they will live there rent-free, or they command a high level of rent for living in your head, and it can be very difficult.
If you could say one thing to someone what would you say to a person who's in that situation, having been there?
The hardest part is, I say, you're, and I have said this to someone I know. You have two choices. You can either live with this hurt, which is really difficult, or you can separate yourself from this person forever, which is very difficult. Which hurt sounds more appealing to you? Being beat up all the time, or being without them and just dealing with the guilt of separating? Because I'm not a therapist, so you have to take my words with a big grain of salt. There is no dealing with one.
No.
And if you can deal with them and you're getting some joy out of that relationship, well, what can I say? That's what you've got to decide. But I think by and large, if it's become difficult controlling your life, you're not getting anything out of the relationship, just cut it off and move on.
We'll be back after these messages. Have you ever thought about becoming an actor and making your friends and family jealous? Well, have I got a deal for you. Here at Working Actors School, we offer many different classes so you can become a famous actor like me. And we have a delightful selection of classes, including Adult Weekly. It's every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Here you will learn how to be an actor with other adults. How do we do it? How is it possible? Is it a miracle? Yes, it is. It's a miracle called Zoom. We teach everything online so you can become a famous actor and impress your friends and family. So if you want to be a famous actor and make your friends and family jealous, then you need to sign up at Working Actors School. You can get a hold of us at workingactorschool.com. You can sign up for classes at workingactorschool.com. You can make a reservation for the class online at workingactorschool.com. So come check us out. It's workingactorschool.com.
Act 2. Success.
Okay, so that's a little bit about Ike's dad so that you guys kind of get the idea here. But there's other aspects of your life. Apparently, you were in movies. So let's talk about a couple of those things. You talked about Gunsmoke, and the director, Irving Moore, told you, just do whatever you want to do. And you said that you realized that you'd never been asked that before.
Yeah.
Was that a moment, or how did that affect you moving forward? As an actor or just as a person?
Yeah, it was a moment as an actor and also as a person because, commercials, especially back in the 70s, they were so over the top and you had to do all this stuff and everyone was looking for energy, and the directors would tell you what to do. Here's what I want, here's what I want, here's what I want. And all of a sudden, this very casual guy, and I love to describe him, especially as I did in the book. He's got this this silk scarf around his neck, and he's lighting a pipe, and he's just sitting back in his chair like this, and he says, just do whatever you want. And it was like it hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, whatever I want. But I was also struggling with something in my head at the moment because my father made me rehearse the dialogue with him out in the outer waiting room. And he was practically giving me line readings. And I just thought, oh my God, this sounds terrible. I can't do it like that. And he was really adamant. And he said, if you don't do it, I know what I'm doing. I've been in this business for 20 years. So you make sure you do it my way. Which is all part of the claiming me in some way as himself or as his own. And when Irving said that to me, I thought, oh, I'm going to do it my way. That's what I want to do. And I just bust out with what I had been running in my own head, aside from what my father had told me. It got me the part. And everything after that. Always from that point forward, I did what I wanted to do. Unless,
now, here's the interesting thing. And again, I promise that to those listening and to you, I won't do this with everything, but I find that so uniquely similar with the idea that my mom was the same way. My mom would work us or run the scenes with us, and she would tell us how to do it.
Yeah.
And there was this implied threat that if I didn't do it the way that she wanted me to do it, I wouldn't get the part. And it even carried on until we were on Little House on the Prairie, my brother and I, where it would be, I would be here, the camera would be here, Michael would be here, and then my mom would be in the background. Yeah. And if she saw me and I was acting and I could see all of them, if Michael was happy, I knew I was good. But if my mom was unhappy, I knew I was in trouble.
Right.
And I was worried about my mom. And it's like, it was a terror. So why I bring that up is I recognize it. I see you, Ike. I see that moment when you realize, oh, wait a minute. My mom or my dad, they suck as an actor, and I have an idea that's different.
Yeah.
So did you then start performing for your dad when he was working with you? And do it the way he wanted, but then go in and do whatever you wanted in the audition?
He stopped making me rehearse with him. He eventually just stopped. And I don't really know why. But see, by the time he saw what I was doing on set and how I was getting things done in one take, maybe two, and the directors were thrilled and they were complimenting me. And because see, that's the same thing. That's where the origin of the title of my book comes from. Irving Moore, who was a wonderful man, I worked with him several times, and he actually became a kind of a family friend. He would come to our parties at our house every once in a while. He was really just a lovely person. And after I did my first close-up on Gunsmoke, he said, "My God, that Ike, that was marvelous." He says, "Boy, we may have just found ourselves a new star here." And I did not know what that was going to mean to me until my father ended up dragging me off into my dressing room and just reaming me out, saying, "He's full of shit. They only say these things to child actors to keep them happy. You'll never be a star, no matter what credit you have. I don't care what anyone says. You get that out of your head, because if it goes to your head, I will rip you right out of this business in a heartbeat." And it was just like, wow, I didn't do it. Someone else said it to me. I didn't say, I'm a star. It was like I ran around doing that, and I never wanted that. It was like my ego is always invested in the work. I just wanted to do good work. And I wanted those people like right around the camera to be happy, especially the director. I didn't care if my father was happy, because it didn't matter. He didn't have any say in it. But when that compliment reared its head, and it happened in many other circumstances, my father he'd start screaming and yelling at the people on the set and say, "I don't ever want to hear anyone on this crew say this about my son. He's not a star."
He would do that on the set?
Yep, he did it twice.
Was that like, it must have been horrifying for you?
Oh, it was beyond horrifying. And everyone just sort of treated me. Then they started treating me like, well, we can't really talk to him. We shouldn't say anything. We can't be nice to him, because that man, his father is gonna.
Right.
It was horrible. And thankfully, it was only on a couple of TV shows, so they were short shoots. I didn't have to be there, to go through that for very long. But yeah.
So was your life at this point kind of bifurcated between, because I know what you're talking about. There's a joy on the set where they literally give you a piece of tape. You got to stand there, say your line. They've written down the line. You know what the emotion is. And if you nail it, you've accomplished it. You did it.
Yeah.
And there's that great feeling of success. And like you're saying, and it's in the project. And like, you're a kid in a world of adults, and this is back in the 70s where there's no Disney Channel, there's no kid stars being treated like that. You're basically a prop that talks. So when you achieve this thing of hitting your mark, saying your line, and doing it well, that's really joyful. I found it to be joyful.
Yeah.
So are you having like a very difficult home life and then this joyful life on the set? And did that spur you to want to work more?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. At home was no fun, and I'm not going to say my dad was brutal all the time. Because life doesn't really work that way unless you're in a really, really seriously abusive relationship with someone. But it was always tense, and I spent a lot of time alone in my room because I didn't want to be around my father. And yes, I wanted to work more. I worked really, really hard to go to work because that was my vacation. That was my vacation time. I got out of the house. I was with people that respected me. I got to do this amazing job, and it was so much fun. And so that was one of the things that kind of saved my early teen years was my contract with Disney, because people know the Witch Mountain films, unless you're my age or older, people, you probably remember The Wonderful World of Disney.
Yeah.
But that was
Sunday
Disney's
night. It was the thing they had there.
Sunday night viewing, and they did so many original stories. And when Disney signed me to a contract, I ended up doing four of those. So I worked every summer for at least 2 months because they were always two-parters. So I had these nice long shooting schedules where I got to go to work. I didn't have to hang out at the house with my father around. Thankfully, I reached a point in my career where, he had to
Was your mom taking you to set, or did you have a set sitter?
My father was initially, and then I got too busy because he had to go out on auditions himself, so he had to go pursue his own career. So we ended up I hired a set sitter to be with me, and that was just like, that was Disneyland to me. I mean, not only working for Disney, but it was just the best thing in the world because I was away from all of it. She drove me there, drove me back. She used to take me out on my
Yeah, and just so
auditions
everybody
and so
knows, when you're a kid actor, you need a legal guardian. And
Yep.
you can hire people to be your legal guardian. It's their job to watch out for you. There's also a social worker on set, which is also your teacher.
Yeah.
But if there's no school because of summer, which is why they usually work kids in the summer, then they're your social worker that's there by the state of California or wherever you are to make sure that you're not being, treated bad, basically.
Yeah.
And they're always this usually short, little, wonderful woman.
My God, I loved my studio teachers. I really did. I got to request when I did jobs. I got to request, and if they were available, they'd work with me. Yeah, it was like that was incredible. But yeah, all those things are in place, and it's a very restrictive environment for a child because you can only work so many hours, and yes, you have all these other things that you have to do. But summers were great because it was no school. 3 hours of school you had to have on set during the school year, and that's a lot of time on a set, to get in when you figure the child can only be there. They say 9 hours, but that's with a 1 hour lunch. So you're talking 8 hours. 3 of that has to be in school, and you only got 5 hours to shoot. And I was always working on stuff where I was working all the time. I was on almost every scene, and so that made it that made it tougher to get the work done. But
Now, you worked with Roddy McDowall for a
Yep.
while on a
Yep.
TV show, Mysterious Island. Is that the name of
The
that?
Fantastic Journey.
Correct?
Yeah, it was originally
Fantastic
called.
Journey,
It was
sorry.
It was the pilot was called The Incredible Journey, but they changed
Okay.
it when it went to series to Fantastic Journey. So yeah.
Now, Roddy obviously is this huge, famously, young actor. He started off as a kid. I'm leading the witness here, but like, obviously, did that relationship inform you in any way that was helpful?
Well, yeah. I mean, we became really good. I say good friends, as friendly as you get on a set. He was lovely to me. We had a lot of fun together. I loved talking to him, spending time with him. But I did know, he did How Green Was My Valley when he was like 7 or 8 years old, something
Yeah.
like that. So he's starring in a movie at 8 years old, but I also looked up to him from the standpoint of his career moved. He grew up in the business. He became a successful adult actor and continued to work until he passed. So he was someone I admired, because you probably remember this, the whole thing about, oh my God, the dreaded 18, when the child actors become 18 or get close to 18, they're not going to work that much anymore, or it's going to be difficult for them. And I don't really remember what all the parameters about that stigma was, but I wanted to keep working. I wanted my career to keep going, and I had we had this looming thing out there. I was 14 when I worked with him, and I thought, man, in 4 years, am I just going to be a has-been? Is it all gonna end for one reason or
Right.
the other? So he was just lovely to work with because he was so positive and he was so much fun, and he was just a delightful human being.
Now, you also work with Betty Davis, who is not a child actor, even though she was in Who's Afraid of Baby Jane.
Yeah.
But she wasn't a baby. But you work with these crazy, big, huge stars in these Disney movies. What was your interaction with Betty Davis and how that... I mean, you tell a great story about the Silver Goblet,
Yeah.
about how to be a star.
Yeah.
How did that affect you?
By the time, it's really funny. Betty was the only star I was intimidated to meet, and only because of her reputation. It wasn't just because she was a star, because from Gunsmoke, I worked with King Curtis, who played Festus. I grew up watching him on TV. And at first it was like, oh my God, Festus is a real person, and his spurs, and he wore his spurs all the time. I don't know how sound dealt with that, but I mean, he was cling, 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 cling. You knew he was coming onto the set, and he was kind of bigger than life and then smaller than TV. if that makes any kind of sense.
I love that.
Because
I love
he
it.
just was such a lovely performer. He included me immediately, and the guy who played my brother in that episode, and I immediately learned that stars are just actors, right? They're there to do a job. We're all there to do a job,
Yeah.
and I adopted that perspective about them from day one, and it never changed with everyone I worked with. It was just like, oh man, they're going to be really cool to work with. I can't wait to, just to get a chance to meet them. And that's just how it was with everyone. So stars were my peers. They weren't stars
Yeah.
until Betty
Right.
Davis came along. And when I learned about the sequel to Escape to Witch Mountain was going to be made, and it was originally called Witch Mountain 2, because of course it's the second one, all of a sudden we started reading in the trades, which is Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety. Betty Davis had signed on to be in Return from Witch Mountain, Escape to Witch Mountain 2. And everyone, I mean, even the people who were reporting on it said, why on earth, she's the biggest star on the planet, what is she doing a Disney movie for? And someone finally asked her, and she said, because I want my grandchildren to have something they can enjoy that I'm in. And
Fair.
so it totally made complete sense. But she also had the reputation of being one of the most difficult stars to work with in all of Hollywood. And I was nervous, It was like, what's this going to be like? Is she just going to be a diva? Is she going to be ordering everybody around? Is she going to be difficult? By the time I arrived on set and I worked my very first day and practically my first scene with her, I thought, oh God, what's this going to be like? And you kind of hold your breath. And she literally just waltzed up to me and said, I'm Betty, it's so nice to meet you, and held out her hand, and I shook her hand, and she just disarmed me instantly with her charm and her humor and her easygoing nature at the moment. But then I kind of slowly learned that she could be Betty once in a while. She liked to see
She
people.
knew how to turn it on, yeah.
She liked to see people run around a little bit and take care of her. And I say in the book, it wasn't that she was unreasonable about her demands. She was just unreasonable about the way she made her demands. And so she would be very like, I need this and I need that, and it was all like, it was water, coffee, a tissue or an umbrella or something like that when she was in the sun, and people would scramble. I mean, the whole crew was on pins and needles with her the whole time. But I had a great time with her, and basically I spent more time with her than practically anyone, because we stood next to each other for weeks at a time while we were shooting the film. So, all that perceived drama that was going to come at us was just gone in an instant. And she was a consummate professional. She knew her lines. She never had to ask for a line from the script supervisor. She knew everything.
Right.
And she was always willing to make it funny or make it bigger or whatever John Huff, the director, wanted. So she was very,
Well, you do tell the story. What's the story of the Silver Goblet, though? Because she kind of schooled you on how to be a star.
It was a rare moment, and probably one of the funniest for me, because we were shooting on the stage where this whole big, very complicated special effects sequence occurs with all, of course, all the effects were practical, so everything was happening right on the set as we were watching it. And for all the wide shots, Betty didn't have to be there because they had a double for her, but I stood next to her double, who from a distance looked a lot like her. She only needed to be there for a two-shot or a close-up. And so when it was time to do our two-shot, they called her in, and she was already kind of in a bit of a pissy mood because her wig wasn't fitting right, and her scalp was itchy, and she was trying to figure out how to get it fixed, and complaining to the hairdresser on set about it. And she said, there's nothing I can do, Miss Davis. We don't have another wig, and the double has the other one, so we can't take it off her and put it on you. I'm so sorry. And she says, oh, just fine. Okay. And everyone walks away, shaking in their boots. And she said, I so hate being difficult. Make do with what you got has always been my motto. And sometimes I can be clever, and I was in this moment, I leaned in and I said, Betty, an attitude like that's going to make you a star one day. And she said, oh, young man, I'll teach you how to be a star. And I said, really? What the heck is going to happen now? And she waves her hand in the air and starts to snap. She had these calfskin gloves on, so snapping her fingers didn't make any noise. It was just water. I need water. I'm thirsty. It's so bloody hot in here. Or probably didn't say bloody. She wasn't British, but she said, it's so damn hot in here. And all of a sudden, everyone looked up and went, okay, I guess we got to get Betty water. And people just started running. I mean, running. Extras were running. The prop master was running. The hair and makeup.
It wasn't a world filled with plastic water bottles.
Those days, no, that was not available. Water was in a tin.
It was like a big metal container.
Yeah, that you had to pour it
paper
out.
Cups.
And all of a sudden, out of the crowd, the prop master came walking up very, very carefully, and he had this silver goblet that I swear to God was this big, and I'd never seen it before. And it was glistening because the ice water in it. And he handed it to her, and he said, "Is this all right, Miss Davis?" And she said, she takes it from him, and she literally takes one sip and hands it back to him. And she says, "Thank you so very much. That was exactly what I needed." And I looked at her shocked. He looked at her shocked. The whole crew was looking at her shocked. And he walked off. And as everyone got back to work, she leaned into me and she said, "That, young man, is how it's done." And I thought, holy cow, man, that is incredible. And that was really the essence of her. She knew she could wield it when she wanted to,
right?
Because no one was going to give her a hard time. But she didn't always wield it. She kind of played it almost like she was just messing with people sometimes. But I thought that was rather incredible, and I got to tell you, it's one of the single most wonderful memories from my entire career, because who has a moment like that with Betty Davis?
That's about it. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh God, it was fantastic.
So you obviously do the Witch Mountain movies, and I gotta ask this. I think when we first did the first podcast, I asked this, but I think it's the question I think people want to know about most of all, which is, what is it like to be a famous kid? What's that like?
It was weird. Bottom line for me, it was really, really, really weird. But I mean, I'm not going to throw this back at you, because you had to know too. You were on the most popular television show in practically television history. So you were on every week. Your recognizability was probably higher than mine in a lot of ways. But I never once thought that
I'm going to throw it back again, because there's difference, because it was a movie versus TV.
Yes.
I get that, but TV and movies were different.
Yeah.
Where it's you were more rarefied, because you had to go to the movie theaters, and movies played for a year or more in a theater before they were done.
Yeah.
So it was you could see the movie a bunch of times, but you had to go to the theater.
Yeah.
And you guys would go to Disneyland. Was that crazy?
I got recognized very frequently at Disneyland, and people were always, by and large, very respectful. It wasn't as much like it is today, because there were no selfies. They might ask you for an autograph, which was fine. I was happy to do it. But what was odd for me was I never expected to become well known. That thought never entered my little head, that because this movie was out and it was popular, and yes, it ran for a year and a half. I think that's how long actually it did. Wow. It did run. It ran for a long time. I started to find the whole idea of being recognized as being very unnerving, But at the same time, I grew up with my father being highly recognizable in Houston, Texas. Everywhere we went, 2 or 3 people would come up to him and ask him for an autograph, because that's how popular his show was. It was huge. It became difficult, especially with other kids, because I didn't go to Hollywood Professional. I went to a regular public school, and throughout my educational career, and I found that I started to learn, what humans are really like when they're uncomfortable with you for no good reason. Just because they can be uncomfortable with you because you are a bully, or you're a nerd, or you're awkward, or you're, or whatever reason. But to be uncomfortable with you because you're famous was a singularly bizarre experience, because I had no social life in school. I didn't really have friends. I maybe had one friend in high school. I did meet a couple of friends in junior high school that I'm still in touch with to this day. But it was still, you walk around like you've got a horn on your head, and people stare at you in a very odd way. And I was a very shy child, despite the fact that
I remember you would be in your room drawing. You're a great
yeah.
artist, and you would be in your room drawing.
Yeah,
and that's where's Ike? He's in his room drawing.
Yeah, that was my preference, was to spend time alone and do my own thing. So it was very awkward for me, but it didn't bother me, because it wasn't like I was trying to have a social life. It was just that's just kind of how things developed. I wasn't upset necessarily by it. I just accepted it and basically had to live with it. But you start to realize everywhere you go, people are looking at you, and that happened for a lot of years for me. It was everywhere. Heads would turn, and my father had this statistic, which I do cite in the book, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know who said it first, but he told me, and of course he was thrilled about my recognizability. I was getting fan mail, and he thought that was just the greatest thing in the world. And I appreciated people reaching out to me, because that it's a lovely thing, to be able to connect with someone that you admire and say, I really love your work and all that. But it was an overwhelming thing that I couldn't manage. I couldn't answer fan mail. There was just too much of it, so I couldn't get back to everybody. I tried to for a while, but it was just like, my God, I got work, I've got school, and I've got fan mail. It's like, and chores. I still lived a normal life at home. It was just entirely too much. But he said at one point, when I said, why are they staring at me? Or, this person came over and asked me for my autograph, and I signed it. And he said, for every one person that recognizes you and approaches you, there's 10 other people that recognize you but don't approach you. And I thought, all right,
wow.
that's a really uncomfortable piece of information to carry around. So, there were times when maybe two or three people would stop me, or I'd be at a deli, a restaurant or something, and 2 or 3 people would come to the table and want me to sign something. And I started thinking, the whole damn restaurant is staring at me. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it. So yeah, it just made me very self-conscious. And
if you're interested in this story, there's a whole movie on it, Letters to Ike, where they talk about. I mean, it's a great movie. I don't know where you can see it, but it's worthwhile. I mean, you talk about it in your book. When I've always described it to my wife, I said, she goes, "What's it like?" And I said, "Well, my wife's pretty," and so I go, "You know how you're pretty?" And she goes, "Yeah, like." Husband and wife. But she's like, okay. And I said, it's like when you're a pretty girl and you walk into a room.
Yep.
And you know that guys are looking at you. It's kind of like it's a low level thing. But there comes a time for all kid actors, no matter who you are, where I describe it like this. You're a product. You're like Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. And then what if Coca-Cola turned into Sprite? Like it's just when we grow up, we turn into adults, and we're not the kids. It's like, you were in Return to Witch Mountain as a sheriff, but you're not running around like a 9-year-old alien. It's like, because you're an adult. It's like, and when you're growing up, you turn into this different product.
Yeah.
And so a lot of kid actors, they turn in from Coca-Cola to Sprite and they try to say, hey, I'm Coca-Cola. And like, no, you're not. You're Sprite. It's like you're not the same thing anymore.
Right.
Did that transition ever happen to you? And or what was the moment where you said, you know what, acting-wise, I'm not going to do the on-camera stuff anymore? My brother did the same thing.
Yeah.
He has his reasons. I didn't. I just fought through it.
Yeah.
What was your story there?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm so grateful you didn't and you fought through it, because last time we did the show, I had not seen Jag yet, okay? And I got to tell you, if there's anybody out there who is not, you know Patrick, but you might not have seen Jag, what a great show. What great work. It was the best work of your career. Swear to God. I absolutely.
Thank you.
We would laugh. My wife, Tia, and I would laugh at your comedy, and it's just outstanding work. So yeah, if you'd given that up, you carried.
That means a lot, man. Thank you.
You well carried your part of that a part of that show, but I didn't have an awkward transition into doing into becoming an adult in the business. I knew what my type was. I knew what my corner was. I wasn't an action hero. I wasn't going to be in a police drama per se, unless I was a victim. You start to learn where your lane is, and if you're good with that, you can make it work somehow. What wore me out was the auditioning process. That was the thing that made it harder and harder and harder and harder and harder for me. And it's just the math. I was not on a hit series. I didn't hit a hit series. I didn't pick one up in my young adulthood. So it was job to job to job to job. And that becomes terribly fatiguing. You have to figure out how to manage your financial life on working 2-3 times a year. And I was still going out on commercial auditions and trying to keep that going because it's incredibly lucrative. And here I was very well known, and yet I was still trying to do commercials. And
at that time, you had this huge Wrigley ad, the Wrigley ad where you're eating the gum in the movie theater, and everyone can recognize that. And that's a national, and you can make a lot of money, and you can live on that. But it's like one day of shooting.
Yeah, exactly. So. I didn't want to give up on that right away, but it was getting more and more and more fatiguing, and I was just looking for. I can't say I was looking for it because it was a ridiculous fantasy. I mean, a fantasy. I said my dream job would be that I just go to work, I don't have to audition, and I act somehow, and I get paid residuals. I mean, it was like this was the most insane thing that I could have said. I never really said it to anyone, but I harbored it. I kept it to myself. But that was what I wanted to do because there was nothing else I could do. I wasn't qualified to do anything else, and I suppose I could have gone into production, and I knew enough people to do that, but it didn't hold that much of an appeal for me. So. Yes.
Well, your dad and brother did that. They became prop masters.
Yeah, they did.
It's
and
absolutely there.
Very successful too, by the way. But of course, my father resented it. It was like you can never make him happy. But anyway, I ended up discovering, just by virtue of a coincidental play I did with this actress, this whole industry called ADR, or looping, and she was involved in it. She'd been involved with it for a few years, and as we were hanging out together, she's telling me about it, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what the heck is this? And as she described it, it's, for everyone who doesn't know what it is, because very few people do, it's post-production work in movies, most primarily movies. TV shows do it as well, but maybe not so much now as they used to. But a group of voice actors goes onto a soundstage and records custom vocal sound effects for movies, for scenes in movies, restaurant scenes or crowd scenes or street scenes or whatever it is, because they don't record that stuff on set when they're shooting. Everyone else is just mouthing their words in the background while the actors are recording their dialogue, so they need those people to actually talk. So they hire these actors. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I said, she said, I said, is that a SAG contract or an after contract? Which back in the day was the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. It was separate from SAG. And she says, no, it's SAG. And I said, so are there residuals? And she said, yeah, there are residuals. And I went, I'm starting to shake now. And she said, I said, do you have to audition for these jobs you're getting? Because she was working 2-3 days a week. And I'm thinking, man, she's working herself to death. And I'm sitting at home, fixing my house when I would really love to be doing something like this. And she says, yeah, there's residuals. No, there's no, you don't need to audition. It says, she just, calls me up and says, am I available to work? And I go to work and I do the job and I just keep doing one after the other. And I thought, how do I get into it? And she said, you don't. I said, what do you mean you don't? And the casting person at the time that, who's still doing it to this day, she's very, very, very prominent in the business, was Barbara Harris. She said, you just don't get into it. And I said, what do you mean you don't get into it? She said, well, you just don't, because Barbara, she finds her own loopers. She doesn't, everybody wants to do it, so she doesn't have to go out. It's not hard for her to find people. She can invite someone in to do it. If they do it, they end up working for her or whatever. But I said, well, can't I give her a call or have my agent call her or something? She says, no, God, don't do that. If you try to contact her, she'll blacklist you.
Blackball you.
Yeah, forever. And I thought, this is the strangest thing I've ever heard of. It's like, how can I can't meet this person? I begged her and I begged her and I begged her and I begged her. And she finally offered up an introduction for me. And I got a cold call from Barbara Harris's assistant who said, Barbara would like to take a meeting with you. Can you come in, on this day at this time, and here's where to go. And I thought, holy cow, I can't believe this. Well, I met her. We got along really well. She booked me on a job for the very next day. And I thought, I have now found the holy grail of work. It was just the most fun work I had ever done. The people in it
because you're acting.
Oh, you're acting
all the time.
It's total improvisation. You're doing very creative things without necessarily being very highly dramatic things or comedic things. Because you're creating sound effects for this movie, and the actors were so talented. And I just looked around and thought, my God, this is so much fun. And she started hiring me more and more and more and more and more until I finally just said, this is what I want to do. I'm done with on camera. I'm done with auditioning, and I've fired my agents, and they all thought I was crazy. But I said, no, I'm done. This is what I want to do.
Well, you worked with her for a while, then you created Mad Dogs and went off on your own and did it.
Yeah.
But again, incredibly, we've talked about this at length, but I got to ask, and again, you don't have to give numbers, but what was the project that you think you made the most money from by doing that? Because again,
I can tell you right
it's
now.
residuals.
I can tell you right now. Shrek and Madagascar. 2 animated movies. We did the first Shrek. We did the second one too, and it pays well, but it doesn't pay quite as well. But I'm not going to give numbers, but
No, you don't need to.
it's one day's work, okay? There's a day player contract. You get paid for the day, all right? And that's it. You move on.
And that's usually what, about $400 to $600 depending on what year
back then it was, yes, because we're talking about was it, good God, the late
Session fee.
90s or whatever. Yeah, that was your session fee. But then the thing about we always, as a group, tried to book as many animation projects as we could because it has the fewest numbers of actors on it.
So over the years, how much, let's say in cars, if I was to go out and buy a new car, could you buy a new car with your Shrek residuals?
Yeah.
Okay, so with your dad, let's just get one more little chunk of this out of here because it's so devastating in the book. You reveal that your dad confessed to killing multiple dogs with like a tranquilizer and some other things. What does that do to your brain about this is your dad? Like, one thing is being domineering and being scary. Okay, that's what, we can maybe all understand that.
Yeah.
But when it crosses over into, I don't know what behavior to call it, except, like when you take the life of a living animal for some reason that's not self-defense, seems really weird. How did you deal with that?
Not very well. Not very well. It was the first indication for me that how dangerous my father could potentially be. And for some, like, again, he I'm losing my word right now, but he always wanted, he wanted my support. He wanted me to admire him for anything that he did. It didn't matter what it was. He wanted to be admired, and he wanted it from me. And one day,
I'm sorry. Why do you think it was from you? Why do you think it was so specific?
Because he didn't do it with anybody else. He had a very weird obsession with me, and even my mother knew it. And because he would try to do this stuff with her, and she just sort of clammed up and didn't talk to him. And so it's like he wanted to raise his own little mini me and have me around for him to, feel better about himself. Damn it!
I think
I
in
can't believe
narcissism they call it supply.
Yeah.
They call it the narcissistic supply.
Yeah, I guess so. That makes sense. But one day, we were talking, or he called me. We had this house that he actually had an area that he could call an office, and he called me into his office, and he was all giddy. And I thought, oh man, what's going on? And he started to tell me the story about a barking dog that he had gotten rid of. And he said, because we lived in, Beverly, just up Benedict Canyon, in the hills, right? So actually it was a really nice house. We had a gorgeous view, but we lived with this valley that went across from our hillside to the one over. And yes, you heard dogs bark occasionally. Sometimes they barked a lot or whatever. But to me, it was just the sounds of, the neighborhood, the sounds of the world. He said, but you remember that barking dog across the hill, across the valley, that wouldn't stop? And I said, I guess. I mean, I never really took note of any of these things because it didn't bother me. But he had developed this absolutely anger-ridden, murderous sense about him because of barking dogs. Because he was at home during the day.
Yeah, he wrote a script about it. Al and I read the script.
Oh, I don't remember that. Honestly, I don't remember that.
He wrote a script called Bark, which tells basically the story that you're telling, but as a fictional story.
Oh my God. Okay, this is crazy. I have never heard this. I must not have been in contact with my father at the time. I've never heard of this. He tried.
Okay, so there were two scripts that Al is your brother,
right?
And it's also he's Al Jr. So same names.
Yeah.
But Al, I would go over to sleepovers at the house you're discussing and at the Sherman Oaks house. And he said to me, he goes, I broke into my dad's office, and he's had two scripts. He's got a script called Spider-Man, which was about this guy that turns into a spider, which, I mean, obviously, it's different. It's like a horror movie where it's like this big thing. And Bark, about this guy who does what you describe in the book. And it's like, and we read these scripts on like sleepovers, and then Al would sneak back in, place them exactly right so your dad didn't know. But I thought everyone knew he had written it. You're saying you didn't know about any of that?
I had not. I've never heard of that. I found my word. I'm struggling. He wanted my approval all the time. That was the word I was missing, because that's the best describes it. He wanted my approval no matter what it was. Whether it was his work, or yes, if he wrote things, he tried to write some things, and he tried to do a whole lot of different things. But he would tell me these stories, seeking my approval over them. And if I didn't give it to him, it was a big problem. So I always had to figure out how do I engage and acknowledge and say, well, good for you, or whatever it is I had to say to get me out of the situation. But this was the most stressful one, because he said I finally got rid of him, and it was around the 4th of July. And so he launches into this story about how this dog's been terrorizing him for so many weeks because he worked from home. You know, he was trying to write things. He was at home. Actors spent a lot of time at home because you had to be close to the phone, so you couldn't really leave, until answering machines were invented. So, he was housebound a lot. And this stuff used to drive him absolutely crazy. And he said, I spent night after night and day after day, because he was a jogger. He'd run up through this neighborhood and try to find the yard that the dog was in. And then he finally found it. And he thought, how am I going to do this? Because he said, then he goes backwards and he says, remember that dog barking when we lived over on, in this other neighborhood? And I thought, well, yeah, I guess I remember. Like I said, I don't pay attention to these things. It didn't bother me.
Yeah.
He said so-and-so had to help me get rid of him. This guy was an anesthesiologist and had access to all kinds of drugs, and gave my father a really heavy-duty tranquilizer that he stuffed into meatballs and threw over the fence and killed this dog. And he said the police wouldn't do anything about it, so I had to take it in matters in my own hands. And you know what those assholes did? They got another dog, and then it started barking, and I had to take care of that one too. And I'm sitting here listening to a confession of a crime. I mean, my father committed an absolute crime, and not one that I can prove in any way. And all of a sudden I'm burdened with this knowledge. And he said, now this one, I couldn't get any more drugs for this one. So I decided I was going to shoot him. And I thought, holy cow. He said, and he thought he was being so clever, because he said, I'm going to wait. I waited till the 4th of July. And while that dog was barking his head off and fireworks were going off, I drove around up there. That damn dog was in the yard, and I shot him right. He said one shot was all it took. And that was it. And you know what? They never got another dog. And I'm thinking, why are you telling me this? Why would you tell me this? Because he was proud of himself. So that's the narcissistic thing. He had no idea he was actually doing anything wrong. He was very proud of what he had accomplished, and he wanted my approval. And I thought, well, gee, Dad, okay. Well, I'm glad you were able to take care of that. And I tried to get out of the situation as soon as I could, but that led to with my eroding relationship with him, because he was obsessed with me. He was constantly trying to get in touch with me, wanted to go to lunch. He was in my face all the time, wanted me to do things for him. I became his little slave errand boy. And I finally, when I talked to my therapist friend, and he gave me the out of that I don't have to be around him anymore. Once I cut him off, I thought that's it. And he started stalking me through the mail. He would send me letters in the mail, reaming me out, calling me names, begging me to talk to him. And I clearly refused to have any contact with him. But one day he sent me, this was just how crazy and obsessed he was. I got a big envelope from Screen Actors Guild, and usually those envelopes had a lot of residual checks in them. It was like when you got a stack, they didn't send them out individually. They just put them together, put them in one envelope, and sent them to you. And I thought, oh my God, it's a payday for me. This is outstanding. I'm going to have a little party on the floor and go through the checks. And I opened it up, and it wasn't that at all. It was like some correspondence from Screen Actors Guild. And as I'm reading through it, I'm thinking, wait, what's this got to do with me? And da-da-da-da. And I turned the page, and it's in between. He had stapled a letter that he wrote to me. And it was a seething, angry, vicious letter that said, how dare you cut yourself off from me? I will not sit for this. You know what I'm capable of. You better be careful. Or in so many words. And I thought,
He threatened you. Yeah.
I just got threatened, and the very next day I went out and bought a handgun, and I had to wait the 2 week waiting period as you do in California, well, probably in a lot of states. I don't know, but I was terrified, and I kept.
How old were you when this was going on?
I was in my late 20s. Yeah, my late 20s, and I thought, the God, I hate it when I can't remember this young actress's name, when she had that crazed fan that
Rebecca Schaefer.
It was that was the first name that came to my mind. Rebecca
Yeah.
Schaefer had happened very recently, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. This is crazy. My father's going to do the same thing. So I got the gun. And
How long ago? I mean, when you got the gun and we got that threatening letter, but like when he told you about the dogs, how long before? How old were you then?
Well, I was in probably my late teens. Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine, honestly, for like not a turn of phrase, I can't imagine what does that click off in you or click on in you now that you know who you're dealing with.
It was an unfortunate confirmation of everything I already knew about him. He had been violent with me once before, when I stood my ground on a very sensitive point for me, and he grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the wall and balled his fist up and said, I'm your father. You can't talk to me that way. What do you know? And it was a very reasonable thing. It wasn't unreasonable, but he just went off. And then he tells me about the dogs, and I'm thinking, God, I don't know what I'm dealing with. And he was physically confrontational with my mother during their divorce, but it was just this very slow build, and I was always afraid of him. And then he was just giving me real serious reasons to be afraid of him.
Back up, yeah.
Yeah, and so I just thought...
I know this sounds really dark and really weird, but with the confirmation, did that justify your lifelong fear? Like going, oh, then I'm not nuts.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad is kind of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also, because I was still in a relationship with him, it added an incredible amount of anxiety and stress to my life, because I never knew what I was going to get anytime I was with him. And I could not, a lot of people who whether or not they're dealing with a narcissist or they're dealing with a drug addict or an alcoholic, you take and you feel you're stuck in the relationship, you take the route of, I will do whatever it takes not to piss this person off. Whatever it takes.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to push any buttons. I'm going to make sure I do what they want, say what they want to hear. And that became my life with them. And that was when I reached the point, and it took years. This took years before I got to the stage where I said, you know what? No, I'm done. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. And then I didn't know what he was going to do. And then to be threatened like that after I knew, he was being very pointed about it. I knew what he was capable of. I was in. I felt like legitimate.
Yeah, exactly. He's literally threatening your safety.
So, but eventually it passed. Eventually he got tired. He got tired of trying to get in touch with me, and I ended up moving to Florida. He'd moved back to Texas, and so we were in completely different states, and no one really knew where I was when I moved to Florida. I didn't really tell. I mean, very many people.
Was he part of that reason?
No. I had just decided to retire from everything. I wanted to leave California, Los Angeles. I just wanted to go somewhere else, and I, ended up not falling into, but almost falling into an incredibly lovely life, here in Florida that I'm thrilled about, and I still pinch myself every day. But
well, you worked hard for it. Okay, so we're into the questions here, which we've already done. So kind of like, unless there's a question that you remember from before, you're like, oh, I'd like to change that answer. We've gone over like, what's your most Hollywood moment, anything like that. I guess what I'd like to do here is ask you what, oh, this is a good one. It's really evil and it's not going to be nice to you. Why should people read your book, Ike?
Because I can honestly say, and this is the only time I've had an ego about anything, it will be the best Hollywood memoir you have ever read. And there's nothing salacious about it at all. And people have said that. My reviews on Amazon are so good. There's not a whole lot of them. That. But my God, and I'm so proud of it. I am so proud of it, and I didn't put something out there that's half baked. I worked many years to tell the best stories and tell the best story that I could, and it's very hard because that's what I thought. I thought I was going to feel self-conscious about it, like it is somehow self-gratifying to do this and say, "Here's my story." But by the time I finished it, and I kept rereading it, thinking, "Oh my God, I would really enjoy this, even if I did not know who I was, even if I had not lived this life." I wanted to write the quintessential memoir about the hands-on experiences of child actors. Instead of reflecting back on it, and that was my intention, and I succeeded there, and I'm getting feedback like that for it. But yeah, it'll be one of the best memoirs you ever read if you decide to read it. Not you, but everyone out there.
Yeah, everybody out there. And I'm really proud of you for actually answering it the way that you should, which is that's absolutely honest, and you worked through all of it. So here's the hardcover. Let me see if I'm getting this right. Here's the hardcover. Look at that cute little kid. Here's the back of it. I mean, this is a high quality, great looking book. It's got pages. It's got pictures. Yeah, you're a little sprout. Just everybody.
Yeah.
Little sprout. So here's the book that you're looking for. It's a great book. It's a great read. It's the best book you'll ever read about being a child star from the author himself. Ike, it's such a pleasure having you here talking about this. And thanks for being so open and honest. I don't want to be too reaching here, but I do believe that by talking about this as honestly as you have, I think it will help a lot of people that find themselves in similar situations, which sadly there's a lot of with people that are in destructive relationships of all kinds, where understanding that going no contact can be the safest, healthiest, most rejuvenating experience for one's life.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And sometimes you have to take you take a little bit of it's a cliche term, but an inventory of all that too. For a lot of people actually recommend writing your own memoir or writing down the stories of what you've been through as a way of processing it and working through it. It's always good to have people to talk to about it, but it's very difficult when you want to talk to someone about it, a relationship like that, and they say, "But my God, they're such a great person. They're so much fun. What are you talking about?" And they don't believe they don't believe you. That makes it more difficult. So yes, if you're at that place where managing it becomes impossible, it worked for me. Distancing myself worked for me, and I was much better off for it.
It kind of was obvious, but I just want to verify. By the end of writing this, did you feel any sort of, not release, but resolution?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I put it down, and because I put it down in a story form, I had to tell it well, I had to tell it properly, and yes, I had to tell it honestly, but I also had to work my way through the chronology, because sometimes we take our memories and we mix them up and we think, oh, maybe it wasn't so bad, or, I'm going to gloss over that because it's too painful to think about. But yes, there was a release in the sense that once I completed it, and I'm not kidding you, I was done. I was done with him. I was done, and I was done with my. I don't want this to sound negative. My own career, because I had a hard time figuring out how did all this stuff happen to me. How did I go through all of that? And I love to say, I do say in my book, and this is a quote, I would look at my IMDb page and I would think, man, this looks like someone, this is a whole life that happened to someone who looked a whole lot like me but couldn't possibly be me. How did I do all of that? I wanted to make sense of all the positive stuff as well. And so that's my postscript here to the end of the interview is, yes, my father plays a very important, pivotal role in my story. But I had so many outstanding experiences. I had so much fun. I lived such a great life as a child doing the things that I did that I wanted to consume that for myself. You know, I wanted to enjoy it, and I wanted to be able to give myself all the credit that my father could never give me for what I accomplished. And
stole from you in the moment. Like even a joy on the set, to take that away from you. I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a really healthy way to look at it.
Yeah. So now, you know, it's out there. I am overjoyed by the people who are reading it, and they're having such a good time with it. And
Ike Eisenmann, You'll Never Be a Star.
It's
my fantastic, challenging journey to Disney, Star Trek, and beyond. Go out, buy it. Buy the most expensive one because it's really beautiful. It's hefty. I like it. Ike, thanks so much, and I loved talking to you. And I'm probably not going to cut anything out of this thing because everything was wonderful. Hopefully, we'll have you back when you write the other stories that you said you couldn't put in because there were just too many.
Tia says it all the time. She says, "Oh my God, that's another great story. You need to write another book." I said, "I am not writing another book. I'll tell them to you on podcasts sometime." Yeah.
Okay, great.